All right, we want to welcome you out to the first installation of a talk-by-talk analysis of the October 2015 General Conference, looking at concepts of undue influence that are kind of encoded or included in the messages of the general authorities. Now, if you are familiar with some of the material that has been covered on the Thoughts on Things and Stuff blog and other resources about people that have processed their journey out of Mormonism, one of the things that you become aware of is that there are a lot of concepts or ideas that are included in Mormon doctrine and teaching that have the effect of keeping you bound to that religion. And when you look at other religions that exert undue influence over their members, you can see that there are a lot of parallels and a lot of similarities. And so people that study organizations that do this sort of unethical control, sometimes it's called thought reform, some people refer to it as cult mentality or something like that. We're going to use the term undue influence. But when you start to see those ideas as they're used in other groups, you begin to recognize them in the teachings and the doctrines that come in church manuals and in church talks, and in particular, General Conference. So the map of what we're going to do is basically to take talk by talk and just kind of listen to the talk and see if we can identify some of those concepts. And we'll discuss them as they come up, and it'll act sort of as a primer for it. So rather than have you listen to me the whole time, I've invited, again, Luna Lindsay to be our guest speaker. Say hi, Luna.
Hi, Jonathan.
She's an author who has written a book. Tell us a little bit about the title and content of your book.
Yeah, it's Recovering Agency, Lifting the Veil of Mormon Mind Control. And in it, I cover all of these concepts, not just looking at conference talks, although I do quote conference talks, but also looking at lesson manuals, the scriptures, other correlated materials, the Preach My Gospel, Missionary Manual, and other LDS resources to just sort of show that it's not limited to one particular venue of LDS doctrine.
That's true. And I think you probably had the same experience that I did when I started learning about this, is as soon as you start to learn a concept, you see it everywhere. You just see it all over the place, and you start to understand just how deeply you were affected by these messages that are kind of subtly saturating doctrine and teachings.
Yes.
Okay, so you know as well as I do that General Conference in particular holds a great deal of sway over the discussion, the culture of Mormonism, because these are the leaders. These are the prophets, seers, and revelators, you know, conveying what, as believing members, we thought were God's wills. These are the messages that are important for us. So why don't we, without further ado, go ahead and dive in. And we're going to start with the first talk that was given on Saturday morning, and it's by Deiter Uchdorf. Which I remember when we were in the church, I always really got excited about listening to him because he had kind of a different take on things. Is that the impression that you got, that he was a different sort of general authority?
Yeah, he was called after I left, I think, because I don't have a lot of memories from him from back then.
Yeah, probably.
But the current talks of his that I have listened to, and he tends to be sort of the hero of progressive Mormons, because his April talk was on grace. It was very grace focused rather than works. So it sort of took the perfectionism a bit out of Mormonism. So a lot of progressive Mormons really like that. He talks about the Savior a lot. He talks about love a lot. So generally, I expect him to have one of the more lighter or tamer or sort of reducing the damage of many of the talks, that other talks that will be given over the course of the weekend. So we'll see about this one.
Yeah.
See where it goes. Yeah.
I get the same thing. The other thing about him is that he's one of the only general authorities that has come out and said, listen, we know there have been mistakes in the past. And so you get a sense that he's aware of some of the difficulties, some of the problems. So let's, hopefully it'll work this time. So let's take a listen.
All right.
I'm going to move this to the bigger video, and we'll hit play.
My beloved brothers and sisters, my dear friends, it's a joy to be with you today. We're standing by the side of 3 empty places here on the stand. We do miss President Packer, Elder Perry, and Elder Scott. We love them, and we pray for the well-being of their families. During this conference weekend, we will be privileged to sustain 3 who have been called by the Lord to take their place among the quorum of the 12 apostles. Your prayers, our prayers on their behalf will strengthen them as they bear the sacred mantle of apostleship. Not long ago, I saw a quote that made me stop and think. It went like this: "Tell a man there are trillions of stars in the universe and he'll believe you. Tell him there's white paint on the wall and he'll touch it just to be sure." Aren't we all a little bit like this? After a recent medical procedure, my very capable doctors explained what I needed to do to heal properly. But first I had to relearn something about myself I should have known for a long time. As a patient, I'm not very patient. Consequently, I decided to expedite the healing process by undertaking my own internet search. I suppose I expected to discover truth of which my doctors were unaware or had tried to keep from me.
Okay, so I want to... I just got to start right there. Okay, so there are a couple of things. So number one, the General Conference in general is set up as just a beautiful authority, megaphone. They could very easily get the audio from these people and not have this huge reverb that makes it sound like they are these great voices in a huge spacious building with all of the attention paid to them. But that's part of the feeling. That's why you listen to that and you're sort of enthralled by those voices. It's just with that reverb there.
That's a really good point. That is something I hadn't really thought of. But yeah, it sounds like the old tabernacle. And I think maybe the old tabernacle had acoustic reasons for sounding that way, because in the 1800s, you really wanted to have that projection of your voice across.
Right, you had to. You didn't have electronic amplification.
Right. And so that was maybe an artifact of those times. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if after they built their spacious building, as people like to call it, they got up there and did a few test runs. And then this doesn't sound like conference anymore. And yeah, it does give that feeling of authority. That's very interesting.
So other than that, so he's already kind of, he's planted this seed, this idea, because we're talking about truth and we're talking about internet. And he's already said, perhaps there was something that my doctors were hiding from me, or, I was going to try to find that. So we already have a sense that he's addressing people that have gone out on the internet and found information about the church.
Right. We'll see where he goes with that. So the very first thing actually is in reference to the new apostles. He just reiterated what every Mormon knows, which is the sacred science of all the apostles speak for God. They're called by God, and therefore he doesn't say they speak for God, but that's the conclusion, is they speak for God. Right. So and then he leads right into that sort of appeal to authority. And we'll see where he goes with the story. The predictable ending, of course, is that he goes on the internet and it either tells him to try something that didn't work out very well, or he found the exact same advice as doctors told him or something. We'll see how that ends. I've had a lot of health issues in my life that doctors couldn't answer, or even times when I didn't have enough faith in the medical system to even bother going into the doctor. And I found a lot of vitamins or diet changes or other really good folk advice from other people on the internet who have had those same issues. And some of those resolutions worked way better than the high side effect medications doctors were giving me, etc. So should be that if we're going to take that analogy, we may as well point out the flaws in the analogy, which is that sometimes even medical authorities who have a lot of evidence-based science behind them don't have the answers. So authority doesn't always have the answer. That's maybe the real lesson I would take from that story.
Yeah, I happen to be a doctor, and so we interact with this as well. Patients coming in with medical information. What do you do? The fact of the matter is, there are excellent peer-reviewed sources of medical information online that have made it their job, because they're competing in a marketplace of ideas, to make accurate information easy to understand and available. And frequently, a patient who's familiar with their symptoms that does a very focused search about their experience will find a potential diagnosis online with a list of potential therapies and bring it to their doctor. And the doctor will say, that's something I need to incorporate in my analysis. And it's actually helpful sometimes. Now, there are other times where, doctors like to rely, as much as there's skepticism about some aspects of medical practice, they do rely on a methodical process for determining whether a therapy is efficacious over a broad population.
Yep.
And so we'll see where he goes. Okay, so let's continue.
All right.
It took me a little while before I realized the irony of what I was doing. Of course, researching these things for ourselves is not a bad idea, but I was disregarding truth I could rely on, and instead found myself being drawn to the often outlandish claims of internet lore.
Okay, so first I want to address, he's saying that his doctor is truth he can rely on. And I think we all go to our doctors and we want to trust what they tell us. But with the availability and accessibility of a lot of medical information, it is going to be possible for you to find information, especially if you have a rare diagnosis or something like that. You may actually be made aware of this before your doctor does, because your doctor, you see that one doctor, but that one doctor sees thousands or hundreds of patients.
Right.
And each of them has a broad medical, background. And doctors now are under increasing pressures to spend little time with patients as possible, just because of the way our medical health system has evolved.
Right.
So I think that we're going to start to see, with the information age and people having access to the internet as this great source of information, we're going to see patients start to take a little bit more responsibility and more involvement in their care, and they will work as partners with their physician.
Right.
And so he's setting up already a paradigm where he's assuming that his doctor is the all-knowing authority, and so he should have no business at all looking on the internet, and that's just not true.
Yeah, and again, as much faith as I have in science and evidence-based, it's way better than leeches and all the things we had in medieval times. Yeah, I have a lot of skepticism about my doctors. I've had doctors steer me wrong. I've had doctors tell me to keep taking a medication that was clearly doing my body harm. I've had all kinds of situations. My Asperger's diagnosis, no doctor ever looked at me and said, no therapist. I've been in therapy for ages. No therapist said, Luna, I think you have Asperger's, right? Because there are blind spots in the science in certain aspects, in this case, when it comes to women being diagnosed with Asperger's. So I stumbled on that by looking on the internet and taking online quizzes, and it all fit. And so I'd go to a psychiatrist or psychologist and say, can you diagnose me? She does the test, and sure enough, I have Asperger's, right? So yeah, I'm with you. I think the real lesson here is that no authority is a be-all, end-all authority, even if they are the best authority we have. That is my takeaway. The members of the church, they are trained to see Uchtdorf as the be-all, end-all authority. Some of them have the same faith in their doctors and others don't. I'm not sure what kind of dissonance that'll create in those members, but be interesting.
Well, I think it's pretty safe. A lot of people, the way he's talking, everyone's like, oh, I want to trust my doctor. I want to believe that he has gone to medical school and so he knows everything. And, a lot of the times when your doctor says, that's interesting, I'll be back in 5 minutes. What they're doing is they're going out and they're searching online.
Yeah.
And, doctors use WebMD. Doctors use medical resources, the same ones that the patients use.
Wow.
And that's because the breadth of medical information is so wide now, nobody can know it all.
Yeah.
And that's why these tools, the internet, is particularly useful, because it helps us index, categorize, and organize information.
Yeah.
And you have to be critical of where you get that information, but because of internal controls and checks, you can start to trust certain areas.
Yeah.
So, there are websites that are reliable, and then there are websites that are less reliable.
Right.
In terms of
They're
conveying.
quacks.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's keep going.
Okay, great.
Sometimes the truth may just seem too straightforward, too plain, and too simple for us to fully appreciate its great value. So We set aside what we have experienced and know to be true in pursuit of more mysterious or complicated information. Hopefully, we will learn quickly that when we chase after shadows, we're pursuing matters that have little substance and value.
Okay, we have to stop it here.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is this concept that software companies use, during the great wars between Microsoft and Apple, which was FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that's where you don't have to disprove something. You just have to cast little seeds of uncertainty about your competitor, about competing information,
Right.
so that people start to doubt it, and then they start to, not act on the information in a way that they would before they had these doubts.
Right.
And what he's doing is he's telling people that they need to trust on the experiences and what they knew before, and not worry about any new information that they have, any complicated stuff. And the difficulty with that is that the church has simplified its history. It's whitewashed its history. It's made it very clean and very simple. And so when you go back and you start to dig into the actual documents and what went on, it's very complicated, and there's a lot to read about it. And
Right.
here he's saying that it's that very complicated nature that means that you should just, not worry about it, because it's not going to, give you the answers that you seek.
Yeah. It doesn't get much more simple than pray, fast, and read the scriptures. But that doesn't fix everything. It really doesn't fix everything. Life is far more complicated than that. He uses terms like mysterious and shadowy. If I have the text in front of me, I could maybe pull out a couple of words that he used to sort of say, and he hasn't actually said he's talking about the church yet, but we know he's talking about the church, is that the church is simple and straightforward, plain and precious, and these other things are shadowy and complicated and mysterious. You're better off just going with the easy stuff. But I mean, I get the feeling that this doctor's appointment he was going to is somewhat complicated. It sounds like he was actually going through some kind of procedure, not just, I get headaches sometimes, here, have some Tylenol. So there's a contrast there in that the church sometimes feels like a Tylenol when what you really have is cancer and you need some actual treatment for your cancer, and the church just keeps handing out Tylenol. That's the way it felt to me when I was a member. Read the scriptures. You have problems, you have psychological problems, you have trauma to deal with, read the scriptures. Like, now that we got modern science that can help with that, and reading the scriptures only goes so far.
Well, I think that they've started to wake up to that a little bit more. You hear more people acknowledge, for example, the reality of depression as a medical condition, and tell people to seek therapy for that beyond, the pay, pray, and obey, or whatever has been the traditional answer to that. So
Right. Yeah.
let's see if he continues along this line.
When it comes to spiritual truth, how can we know that we are on the right path?
Okay, again, I'm going to pause it there. So there's this idea that there are different types of truth. There's factual truth about the real world, and science and things like that, and then there's spiritual truth. And while we can, use reason and science and logic to address factual truth, we shouldn't apply those things to spiritual truth. That sounds good on the face of it. What they don't realize is that the things that cause people questions aren't in the spiritual realm. They're looking at very factual things. For example, Joseph's activities in terms of polygamy, how he managed finances, the whole treasure-seeking thing. Those are very tangible things that have to do with reality that you can apply logic and reason to.
Right. Yeah, he's crossing. He's also, and I meant to say this before too, there's some sacred science going on here, where the implication is that the truth he is talking about is the church truth, and that church truth is the one and only truth, and it's a universal truth that applies to all people. And of course, he is an apostle, so he has the authority to tell you what that truth is.
No, exactly. Even doing something as simple as we are, where we're dissecting his words and trying to dig through it, that's not something a conventional Mormon would ever do, because you just do not question these men.
No, you don't criticize. Yeah, exactly. You don't critically analyze what they're saying. So, yeah. Yep.
Okay, let's keep going.
One way is by asking the right questions. the kind that help us ponder our progress and evaluate how things are working for us.
Okay, this talk is just so saturated with it, we're going to have to stop after every sentence. So this is a concept that you'll see from people in FAIR, and you'll see bishops using and stake presidents using, and that is that it's okay to question, it's okay to doubt, but there's a difference between having questions and questioning. Have you heard that concept before?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. Yep.
And so basically, if you ask questions, but your questions are critical questions where the answer kind of implies that, you know, there's really only room for the answer that would tend to impeach the church or its leaders, then that's questioning, that's bad.
Right.
But if you're asking a question, like it's kind of like on Joseph Smith polygamy, if you say, you know, I wonder how Joseph's unconventional marriages fit into the grand scheme of God's plan for eternal marriage, then you're asking the question and you're making sure that they understand that you're going to allow that to fit in the framework of the church.
Right. There's always that core unquestionable doctrine.
Right.
You will never question whether God exists. You will never question the plan of salvation. You will never question the atonement. You'll never question Joseph Smith was a prophet. Those are the things you cannot question. You can. One thing I loved about Mormonism as a Mormon is you could question all of the other stuff. You could question circles around all of those central things all day long. And yeah, but you don't question those core doctrines.
Right. So if you say, you know, Joseph Smith married people in absolute violation of the Doctrine and Covenants 132. He lied to his wife about it. You know, all these things that would tend to really impeach Joseph. That suddenly, if you ask those questions, then you're a questioner. Right. And you're not really asking questions. You don't really want answers. You just want to try to convict the leaders of the church to sow discontent and to cause strife. And we all know that, you know, it's Satan that's the root of all of those things. So
right. And he wants to frame, he wants to reframe the questions. That's what he's doing here is totalist reframing. He wants to reframe how you're asking the questions in order to reach preconcluded answers, i.e. the church is still true no matter what. And there's also some mystical manipulation it feels like he's heading into in terms of how we're going to find those answers. So we'll see.
All right, let's keep going.
All right.
Questions like, does my life have meaning? Do I believe in God? Do I believe that God knows and loves me? Do I believe that God hears and answers my prayers? Am I truly happy? Are my efforts leading me to the highest spiritual goals and values in life? Profound questions regarding the purpose of life have led many individuals and families throughout the world to search for truth.
I'm going to pause on that one, if I can hold my thought. I noticed that the answer to most of those questions, you want it to be yes. Did you notice that? Like, does my life have meaning? Does God love me? And then one of them was really inspirational. I think the one about something about, do we have a purpose, and are we, because kind of inspirational, be like, yes, I really want to be inspired and have a purpose and do all of that thing. And so you're going to be filled with a bit of elation in that moment, or euphoria. And you want the answers to be yes. Yeah. So that's a bit manipulative there.
The other thing is that those aren't the questions that people have when they start digging through church history. They don't say, gee, Brigham Young was a bigoted racist. I wonder if, I have meaning in my life.
Right.
Those questions are the ones that kind of come after. All right, so let's continue on here.
Often that search has led them to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and to the restored gospel. I wonder if we, as church members, might also benefit from asking ourselves from time to time, is my experience in the church working for me? Is it bringing me closer to Christ? Is it blessing me and my family with peace and joy as promised in the gospel?
I think it's very interesting that this is the direction his questioning or his discussion has gone on, because he first started talking about looking on the internet for truth when you have questions and not being able to trust that information.
Right.
And now he's addressing, problems that people have where they do, perhaps feel like I'm doing everything that the church wants me to do, but I still feel this, it's not working for me.
Right, which can be a huge cause of doubts. And I actually saw this quote come by on Twitter already. So it's one of the quotes I favorited for looking at later. So I really hope he doesn't, what's the poker term when you put in your, I don't know. I hope he doesn't call this one back. I hope that he stays on this thread and says something like, if you're having struggles with the church, maybe that's legitimate. Like, I kind of hope he doesn't somehow shame people, or I hope he doesn't go into a bad place on this.
Now, just what is the classic, undue influence response to this type of problem? If you're having problems in the group, what is the classic response of these groups?
Deny that you're having problems with the group. I mean, the classic LDS approach to this is an ostrich with a head in their sand, or their head in the sand. The idea that everyone in the church is happy around you. No one talks about how each as individuals, they're not fitting in the way they think everyone else is. And so they think that they're the only one who isn't experiencing fulfillment from the gospel. So the fact that he's even saying this is really interesting, would be really validating to so many people and potentially very healing to them, which is why I really, really hope he doesn't go somewhere bad with this.
Well, we'll see. One of the things that, like Jehovah's Witnesses and a lot of these other groups, is if it's not working for you, then you're not doing it enough. You're not doing it enough. You need to do more hours, more reading. You need to pay more, pray more. You need to do, and so the member who's unfulfilled is left just feeling even greater weight of the difficulty because they feel like, I'm not. It's not working for me, and it's all my fault.
Blame reversal is very huge. Yeah, if it's even brought up at all, and usually they just get people to ignore it. But blame reversal for where it can't be ignored. Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
Okay.
Alma posed similar questions to the church members in Zarahemla when he asked, "Have ye experienced this mighty change in your hearts, and can you feel it now?" Such contemplation may help us to refocus or realign our daily efforts with the divine plan of salvation. Many members will answer with great warmth that their experience as a member of the church is working exceptionally well for them. They will testify that whether during times of poverty or prosperity, whether things are pleasant or painful, they find great meaning, peace, and joy because of their commitment to the Lord and their dedicated service in the church. Every day I meet church members who are filled with a radiant joy and who demonstrate in word and in deed that their lives are immeasurably enriched by the restored gospel of Jesus Christ.
All right, so he's kind of fulfilled that prediction. He talked about Alma saying, have you had this great change in your heart and in your life? So there's, if you haven't had that yet, you're having difficulties finding fulfillment in the gospel, you need to try harder. You haven't had that experience yet, so you need to do more.
Are you living on borrowed light? The same
exactly. Yeah. And then he's going, I've met lots of members who find even when life is really, really bad, they have great strength and vitality in the church. And it helps them overcome those adversities. Well, remember, he's talking to people who, even without the adversities, are finding difficulty in the church. So let's see where he goes with that.
I'm hoping now he said some people, he's met some people like this. I'm hoping that is followed with but I've met other people. So let's see where he goes.
Right.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that there are some who have a less than fulfilling experience, who feel that their membership in the church sometimes isn't quite what they had hoped for. This saddens me because I know firsthand how the gospel can invigorate and renew one's spirit, how it can fill our hearts with hope and our minds with light. I know for myself how the fruits of the gospel of Jesus Christ can transform lives from the ordinary and dreary to the extraordinary and sublime. But why does it seem to work better for some than for others?
Okay, before he goes into that,
Yeah.
it's just,
I'm on the edge of my seat here. I'm like, wow, we've never had this level. I mean, we never get this level of acknowledgement.
well, the thing is, he said, we acknowledge that it doesn't work for some people, but then he said, it saddens me because it works great for me.
Right.
And remember,
right.
this is a guy who doesn't have to worry about his retirement. He doesn't have to worry about medical expenses and the rest of his life. He doesn't have to worry about his children getting college education. He doesn't have to worry about anything because it's all provided by the church. And everybody adores him. Everybody hangs on his word. They're all eager to listen to the silver fox. And so it's, the fact that he's, it saddens him when people don't find the same joy in the gospel that he does.
Right.
Doesn't really acknowledge the difficulties and realities of everyday members.
Yeah, and he's also probably mentally healthy. He's probably never, who knows? Everybody has ups and downs, but he's probably never battled major depression. Right. He is white and male, so he can have a position of power within the church. So yeah, he has a lot going for him that, say, for instance, me as a divorced single mom in my mid-20s who still couldn't find a guy to marry, that was a different level of struggle altogether. Absolutely. So yeah, we'll see where he's going with this. So I'm all excited to see where he's going with it. So
what is the difference between those whose experience in the church fills their souls with songs of redeeming love and those who feel something is lacking? As I have pondered these questions, a flood of thoughts came to mind. Today, I'd like to share two. First, are we making our discipleship too complicated? This beautiful gospel is so simple a child can grasp it, yet so profound and complex that it will take a lifetime, even an eternity, of study and discovery to fully understand it.
Okay, so I want to call out doublethink on this.
Okay.
So again, he's kind of putting the burden of the failure of people to be fulfilled by the gospel on the individual themselves. You've turned the gospel into something too complicated.
Yeah. Did he say you or did he say we? I thought he said, have we made discipleship too complicated? Like I got the feeling, I wish I had the text in front of me so I can do some real nitty-gritty word analysis there. If he is calling the church, the direction of the church itself to lay off of demand for purity and relax the perfectionism problem a bit, then I'm just smiling. I'm grinning from ear to ear. Yeah, if the church says, hey, let's get back to basics. Let's get back to just, let's set aside this list of 70 commandments here and let's just focus on today. What are you feeling the Spirit today? Are you loving your family? Are you being honest and kind and good to your fellow man? And let's just focus on those basic Christ-like core issues. If he's calling the church to do that, then awesome. Again, there's probably a bunch of other conference talks that are going to cancel him right out. So everyone gets to know, yay, Uchtdorf, the church has changed. It's a miracle. And then the church hasn't really changed. But yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of an optimist. Maybe.
Even if he said we, though, what he's saying is he's now saying of the subset of people who it doesn't work for, I'm going to include myself there just so it doesn't seem like I'm accusing. And I'm going to say, have we perhaps made, just like when your mom's is like, have we not cleaned our room?
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And they often do, it's not working for you. Oh, you're not trying hard enough. And then they turn around, oh, you're trying too hard. Like when some of the perfectionism stuff was coming out, there were some studies a couple of years ago about perfectionism leading to issues with depression in LDS women, etc. And that was the big thing of like, well, you're trying too hard. God never said, we never said to work so hard. You shouldn't work so hard. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And you're right. There are a lot of double binds in the church
And so here, the double think is, the gospel is simple. Even a child can understand it, but it's so complex that it takes a lifetime to understand. And what that sets people up, that double think, is that now, because they're accepting that it's simple, so they should be able to understand it, but it's so complex, it keeps them in a state of anxiety so that the church leaders can say whatever they want to say in the future. Right. And then the members are like, well, it is so complex that it's going to take a life to understand. So they'll accept anything that the church leaders do. And George Orwell just articulated that precarious position so well in 1984 for how leaders use doublethink to keep people from having any solid concrete footing to stand on and allow the leaders to continue to change things. So let's keep going.
But sometimes we take the beautiful lily of God's truth and gild it with layers upon layers of man-made good ideas, programs, and expectations. Each one by itself might be helpful and appropriate for a certain time and circumstance. But when they are laid on top of each other, they can create a mountain of sediment that becomes so thick and heavy that we risk losing sight of that precious flower we once loved so dearly.
So he just described demand for purity almost exactly the way I did in my Sunstone talk. It's the Cinderella idea. You could go to the ball if you want. You just have to do your chores and these other chores and these new things and this stuff. And by the way, we're going to break and undo everything you just did. And now, we said you could go to the ball. You're just not ready yet. Why aren't you ready yet? Right. So he just described that to all the members, which is, now he didn't say, these are the LDS commandments that I'm talking, like he didn't actually say that. But it
sounds like he's doing what you alluded to before, which is that he's saying that we've got all these programs that we've added on top of the gospel that maybe we're losing sight of the gospel because of all of these programs. So I think what you were suspecting may actually be the tone of his talk.
I hope so. Again, I'm an optimist, but yeah.
Well, that's good. You balance me out because I tend to be not quite optimistic. I've been burned too many times. All right, let's keep going.
All right.
Therefore, as leaders, we must strictly protect the church and the gospel in its purity and plainness and avoid putting unnecessary burdens on our members.
That is gold. I don't think he's talking about tithing, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's talking about extra meetings, extra conventions, extra, evenings in the week where family members are at the church house doing stuff rather than with their families and actually living their lives.
And it would be good if they backed off that. In order to do that, they would have to actually get together as apostles and prophets and actually make some policy changes and make it official. Otherwise, this is all just smoke and hot air. The other thing is that it's not just all the meetings and programs and stuff like that. And by the way, if those are actually and can be fulfilling to some people, if they're doing a dance festival or something, that can be really exciting and fun. What I'd also like to see is maybe some things like either cutting back the 3-hour block or doing service during some of those 3 hours, doing some, if you're going to do service,
you can clean the church building.
No, like real service, like actually help the homeless and the sick, feed the sick, and actually, and I'd also like to see them back off on a lot of the commandments that I just really don't have a testimony in. We'll just put it that way. A lot of the make work commandments that keep getting called dire and vital. A lot of the commandments that bar us from communicating with our own emotions and our own bodies, that in order for this to really work, that's what they would have to do, is stop talking so much about chastity, stop talking so much about temple work and genealogy, lax up on the tithing a bit, just, go back to when it was on your increase, which is your actual profits after you're done feeding your family.
No, they're doing pretty good keeping that vague. There's no reason to change that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I'm going to call him on, maybe not Uchtdorf's BS, but on the church's BS, because unless they actually do some of those as policy changes, then these are just words that he's saying. It's not going to matter to the daily member, because they can sit and listen to what he's saying, but they're still going to be called in to clean the church, like you pointed out. They're still going to have to pay their tithing even before their rent. I mean, they're still going to have to do all of these things, regardless of what Uchtdorf happens to be saying right now.
All right, let's see where he goes.
All right.
And all of us, as members of the church, we need to make a conscientious effort to devote our energy and time to the things that truly matter, while uplifting our fellow man and building the kingdom of God. One lovely sister, a Relief Society instructor, was known for preparing flawless lessons. One time, she decided to create a beautiful quilt that would serve as the perfect backdrop to the theme of her lesson. But life intervened. There were children to pick up from school, a neighbor who needed help moving, a husband with a fever, and a friend who felt lonely. So the day of the lesson approached, and the quilt was not completed. Finally, the night before her lesson, she did not sleep much as she worked all night on the quilt.
I just gotta say, a quilt as a lesson handout, like best handout ever. You're making an entire quilt for a lesson. Okay, I'm gonna play again.
Well, the eldest quorum guy would have remembered the lesson the morning of and maybe skimmed it and then just, talked about football or something. I don't know. It just it amazes me. You women in the Relief Society are so much more together.
Hey, ordained women, that's all I'm saying.
The next day, she was exhausted and barely able to organize her thoughts, but she bravely stood and delivered her perfect lesson. And the quilt was stunning. The stitches were perfect, the colors vibrant, and the design intricate. And at the center of it all was a single word that triumphantly echoed the theme of her lesson: simplify. Brothers and sisters, living the gospel doesn't need to be complicated.
So my thoughts on that section is, again, you got that. So now he's starting to bug me. You've got that double think and those double binds, because we're probably going to have at least one talk during this conference that says the phrase magnify your callings. If we don't have it this conference, it kind of doesn't matter, because we've had it so many other conferences. It's going to be in a couple of the lessons coming up in Sunday school. Like the concept of magnify your callings. So supposedly we're supposed to simplify, and yet you have to magnify. That's what the sister was doing. She was magnifying her calling. And not only that, but
makes a quilt for a lesson.
It's ridiculous. I don't even know if that story is true. It sounds like total fantasy to me. But and the other thing too is this focus on. It's a thought I kind of just had, is the focus is on your callings, and by that they mean your church callings, the calling that a priesthood leader has set you apart to do. And I don't believe in God, but I am a spiritual person, and I'm starting to sort of realize that a calling is a feeling that you get that says you need to do this right now. And whether that's a little thing, like doing something nice for someone, just a charitable act, or a much bigger thing like writing a book. To me, a calling doesn't have to come from a priesthood authority or anyone. If God or the universe is speaking to all of us, then to me, it's magnifying my calling is like a ceremony I went to last night to help a young lady through some suicidal feelings that she's been going through. That was a calling. Me going there and helping her feel loved and valued as an individual was a very spiritual and spirit-led act, right? Yeah. And so this dominance, this monopoly that the church has on these callings does get people spinning. In his story, he talked about what she was distracted by. I hope he addresses that, by the way. She was distracted by, I forgot all the things, right? She had to pick up her kids, or she had to do all these things to actually help people, not to teach a lesson that has been taught a million times, that those sisters have already heard 1,000 million times, but to help the people in her life. And that,
well, maybe that's
can
the
be
point
a
he was
calling.
making. Maybe he was making the point that
Yeah.
because he had put so much focus on, you know, doing the perfect lesson with all this extra stuff, it crowded out, you know, to her credit, she allowed the important things of helping
Right.
other people to take place in her life. But maybe
But
he's
did
making the
she
point that
value
they
those?
should.
Did she give
That's a
herself
good
credit?
question.
Did
If she
she
feels
enjoy
like,
it? Right? Did she enjoy the moment? I am doing this, I am choosing in this moment with my agency to help get my kids' homework done, right? As opposed to, holy crap, I'm stressing out because I got to get my lesson done and my kids and my homework, right? That's a different experience altogether. So
no, you're right. And what you're referring to is kind of a dispensation of existence thing, where the roles that people choose for themselves in their life are subordinate to the roles that the organization chooses for them because of their claim of divine authority. I remember the last calling that I got was to be the ward building coordinator, and the bishop said, you know, I want you to know that God wants you to be the building coordinator. And so, you know, whatever inclination or impression that, you know, my bishop, who's this guy down the street that works for a company, you know, God was speaking through him rather than just me directly about what my role in life was.
right.
So, but that's a, you know, a little bit of a an aside from this. So let's see where he continues.
It is really straightforward. It could be described like this. Hearing the word of God with earnest intent leads us to believe in God and to trust his promises. The more we trust God, the more our hearts are filled with love for him and for each other. Because of our love for God, we desire to follow him and bring our actions in alignment with his word. Because we love God, we want to serve him. We want to bless the lives of others and help the poor and the needy. The more we walk in this path of discipleship, the more we desire to learn the word of God.
Okay, so he's talking about some things that you'll find in a lot of different groups. And, you know, basically, actions can influence belief. If you actually act on something, then you're going to be more inclined to believe that it's true. And there are
Belief follows behavior is what that's called.
Exactly. Belief follows behavior. And there are sociology experiments that have documented this effect. Also, you know, saying something out loud increases the chance that you're going to believe it yourself.
Public commitment is what that's called.
Okay, excellent. And, you know, he's talking about basically these are the cycles of action, belief, and behavior that bind you closer and closer to the church. And he's talked about this before, where he said, you know, if you step away from the church, then the light that's within you will diminish and grow dimmer over time. And the thing is, that same thing is true in the Jehovah's Witnesses and in Scientology. The more distance that people have from doing the repetitious actions, the you know, whether it's chanting, whether it's the readings of the publications, the less frequently and more distant that people have from that, the less their minds are enmeshed by the controlling messages of those other groups.
Right, and then you can be distracted by the things of the world, etc.
Right.
Yeah, and it would be better. I would not begrudge a lot of that behavior if it actually was service like he's talking about.
Exactly.
The problem is, again, it's a lot of it's make work. It really doesn't do. Even a lot of the service that say the Relief Society does, etc., is kind of actually make work. There's a really heartwarming video of that one hymn, because I think it's because I have been given much, I too must give. Or it's another one. And one of the really heartwarming giving ones, where the video is great. It's kind of a pop upbeat version of this hymn, and yet the people in the video, what is their service project? They're cleaning up a park. Now, we do need to clean up parks. That's really, really important and valuable. That's a good thing. but where are the actual mourning with those who mourn and comforting those who stand in need of comfort? Actually looking at the emotional needs of our fellow members or people outside the church, actually getting down, going to a homeless shelter and actually helping. We do a lot of casserole baking for fellow members. And again, I don't want to downgrade that or anything or say that it's not useful, because there are a lot of elderly ladies and pregnant women, etc. We're very grateful for that. It's all really good. But it does kind of seem to me a lot of the service ends up really watered down as compared to what service from a lot of other churches, or even if you just go to volunteer, where you're really in the trenches actually helping people who really, really, really need it.
The other thing that I've noticed listening to him, and I, based on some of the memes I've seen, this is going to be an issue, is that they're now using this phrase discipleship. And it sounds good. It's encoded with this biblical language, and we think about discipleship and we think we're following Christ, we're following God.
Right.
And the kind of the hidden switcheroo in all of this is what they really mean is that you're following the edicts and the commandments and the restrictions that these men in the general authority seats are giving you. And so they're, it's the same thing. We're just not going to say that. We're going to say you're following God, you're a disciple, it's discipleship. But what it really is these men and their claim to their lineage of authority.
Yeah, which he set up at in his very first part of the talk when he was talking about the new apostles and how they were called of God. So yeah, it's actually true. Every time I hear one of these talks and they say the word God, I automatically replace. I kind of have two threads of thought. One of them is me replacing the word God with the church authorities. Just the church, follow the church authorities, listen to, and the other part of me is going, okay, how could I invert this and just really hear it on a personal level? Like if God were actually speaking directly to me, how can I subvert their dominant paradigm and think about what God might actually be telling me? So I kind of do it both ways. But yeah, he's talking about them. He's talking about the apostles.
All right, let's keep going.
All right.
And so it goes. Each step leading to the next and filling us with ever-increasing faith, hope, and charity. It is beautifully simple, and it works beautiful. Brothers and sisters, if you ever think that the gospel isn't working so well for you, I invite you to step back, look at your life from a higher plane, and simplify your approach to discipleship. Focus on the basic doctrines, principles, and applications of the gospel. I promise that God will guide and bless you on your path to a fulfilling life, and the gospel will definitely work better for you.
So what do you think? He's concluded his first point. So his first point is basically simplify. Now he said if it's not working for you, that you should step back and look at your life from a higher plane. I wonder what he means by that.
And it's vague enough that people will project their own interpretation on that. I don't think it's too vague to kind of read anything into it. I think a lot of members are going to hear that, and the most desperate. Many of the most desperate ones will think, "Yeah, I need to simplify. I need to," and they're really going to cut out some of the perfectionism, which is kind of hard to do. But I think they're going to really hear what he's saying. But
hold on a second, though. Is he actually saying no more perfectionism? I mean, what I heard him say was you need to simplify your approach to the gospel and do the basic, simple things, and I promise you it will work. Which means that if somebody who really is having depression says, okay, well, the basic things, let's see, that means I need to read the scriptures, go to church, and pay my tithing. And so they do those things, and none of those things are efficacious for the problem of depression.
Right. But
so if it doesn't work,
cutting out all of the extra baggage they're carrying, like going to the temple, doing genealogy work, showing up at extra meetings, magnifying.
Actually, I think some people may think those are part of the simple gospel.
Yeah. See, and that's the thing. That's why I said some people are going to hear it this way. That's the thing about these talks. Some people will hear it one way, other people will hear it others. Even those who hear it in the best, most possible light, in the most healing, just you need to chill out and take some time off. Those kind of people, next conference or even a few talks from now, they're going to hear it is absolutely vital that we raise our children in the gospel, or else. It's
Oh, and
absolutely
I can tell
vital
you that
that
is
we
coming.
do
I
our
heard
food
it talk.
storage, or else, right? Like, so that's kind of the drawback there, is anyone hearing this going, it's the first talk of conference. Anyone hearing this going, yeah, I could probably just take a couple hours of some me time now and then, right? Just kind of really just simplify. Yeah, that might kind of be undone for them by the time they're even done with just the session of conference. So,
well, let's see. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt, maybe.
All right.
So okay, so his first point is simplify. And I think that the underlying message there is good. Unfortunately, I think there is a subtle tone of, there are some basic things and you just need to do them and do them and do them, and it will work. So if you feel like it's not working, you just need to keep doing them more and more, because there's this nebulous, it will work. And he's an apostle. He's a prophet, seer, and revelator, and he said it. So let's see.
My second suggestion is start where you are. Sometimes we feel discouraged because we are not more of something. More spiritual, more respected, more intelligent, healthy, more rich, more friendly, or capable. Naturally, there's nothing wrong with wanting to improve. God created us to grow and progress. But remember, our weaknesses can help us to be humble and turn us to Christ, who will make weak things become strong.
He's got a lot going on here, so I just kind of paused before I lost all my trains of thoughts. That first part, just start where you are, be who you are. That is really super duper good advice. It's a Buddhist idea. It's also a very therapy, self-help psychology kind of idea. That they tell a lot of people who have depression. It's kind of almost a cognitive behavioral therapy idea, where you look for your intrinsic value as a person being, a human being, rather than looking for your value in the things that you have accomplished and the ways that you are better than others and the ways that you're perfect, basically. So that's really good advice. And if we heard more of that coming from the church, that, the idea that the atonement has already atoned for your sins. So that doesn't mean crucify Christ anew, which is terrible, terribly psychologically terrible. But if we said, no, the atonement has actually cleansed your sins. So you are just perfect the way you are. Keep striving, but just, be with yourself. That would be really great. So then my second fork on that is, I don't like how the church uses humility, because it's often used to employ doctrine over self. In other words, you don't know anything. You're not any good. You need to humble yourself to God. And as we've already established, God means church authority. So it's kind of a way to get you to suppress your own doubts or your own criticisms or your own sadness or your own trials, so that you can stay. So I kind of wanted to pipe in there with that too, because that word humility always sets off my alarm bells.
No, I agree completely. When you hear humility on that, then it's basically anyone that criticizes or finds problems with the church is not being humble. Because if they were humble, they would, look at themselves rather than look at the milieu that they're in.
Right. And in actuality, humility has more to do with how we compare ourselves to others and whether or not we're willing to listen to others. So the member who takes the church's humility advice to the extreme actually kind of ends up being prideful, because they think that they know everything because they are following the gospel and the word of God, and you aren't. Therefore, I'm not going to listen to you because you're just a sinner. And yeah, that's not humble either. Humility has more to do with how we relate to other human beings. Are we giving other human beings a chance to be heard? Are we being kind to them and nice, or are we just railroading right over them? So
yeah, and it's difficult for a rich man to be humble, but when you read some of the historical records like the Stuart Udall sequence or the Nelson Laurie exchange, you see that these men that sit in these seats of authority in the church really believe that revelation and knowledge comes from the top down, not from the bottom up. And so there's no humility in terms of listening to the members and learning from them, because things work the other way around.
Yeah,
so let's see where he goes.
One way humility. Yep.
Satan, on the other hand, uses our weaknesses to the point that we're discouraged from even trying.
Okay, so this is the first time that he's invoked Satan. And I've started discussing and learning a lot about Jehovah's Witnesses and how they are bound to their particular organization, and they use Satan like all get out. Like,
Yep.
Anything that goes wrong, Satan's there lurking.
Yep.
We don't encounter it as frequently as they do, but occasionally we do. And there's just this big bugaboo where they can attach Satan to anything that might go wrong or be a difficulty with them, and then people just automatically defer to that notion or that idea.
Yeah, and I don't think we have it as much in the actual correlated materials, as they call it, but I think we do have it culturally pretty strongly. It kind of depends on maybe your region and your family and your ward and things like that. But yeah, I know in my upbringing, Satan was a pretty big part of our lives, or at least us trying to avoid Satan was. So.
All right, let's hear more about what Satan's doing.
I learned in my life that we don't need to be more of anything to start to become the person God intended us to become. God will take you as you are at this very moment and begin to work with you as you need, and all you need is really a willing heart, a desire to believe, and trust in the Lord. Gideon saw himself as a poor farmer, the least of his father's house.
Overall, I like the direction. I just wanted to point out is all you need is a willing heart. That is kind of a way to soften your mind, and the desire to believe in a willing heart. I don't know if there's a specific thought reform technique that falls under, but it's basically saying, let down your guard, soften your, destabilize your pre-existing notions, soften your criticisms, and then you'll get a testimony. And yeah, if a presidential candidate stood up there and said, I want you to have an open mind, I want you to just desire to believe all the promises I'm about to tell you, and I want you to have a willingness to believe the thing, you might go, that doesn't seem right, but they do it.
You just described every political platform and politician.
They're usually not that blunt about it, though, right? They just make their promises. They don't try to. They have other ways.
Yes,
of
we
softening.
can thing.
Exactly.
These are the things we're gonna. Yes, we can.
Yes, they have other ways of softening your mind. They don't just stand right out and go, I really want you to just right now, I want you to be convinced of everything I'm going to say, which is kind of what he's doing here. So, but other than that, I still really I think if all conference talks were like Uchtdorf's talk here, we'd have a much less controlling and traumatic and spiritually abusive religion. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he just said that Satan is the one that gets in your mind and makes you feel like you're not enough. But the thing is, no, that's not it. It's the culture of the church that makes you feel like you're not enough. It's this demand for perfection, and.
But again, if every conference talk was like Uchtdorf's, then the church wouldn't be demanding perfection quite so often, right? So then it wouldn't. Yeah.
But you have to remember, though, Uchtdorf talks a telestial/terrestrial gospel. When he says the gospel is simple, he's not talking about the celestial kingdom. He's talking about the grace that's afforded everybody that's going to get them at least into the celestial kingdom or the terrestrial kingdom. And there's the last conference where he talked about the airline or the ticket. There's a Thoughts on Things and Stuff article that really looks at what he says and shows that it's not the message of grace the same way that conventional Christians think about grace. So I'll invite the readers to take a look at that.
But God saw him as a mighty man of valor. When Samuel chose Saul to be king, Saul tried to talk him out of it. Saul was from one of the smallest tribes of the house of Israel. How could he be king? But God saw him as a choice young man. Even the great prophet Moses felt so overwhelmed and discouraged at one point that he wanted to give up and die. But God did not give up on Moses. My dear brothers and sisters, if we look at us only through our mortal eyes, we may not see ourselves as good enough. But our Heavenly Father sees us as who we truly are and who we can become. He sees us as His sons and daughters. as beings of eternal light with an everlasting potential and with a divine destiny.
So this is, again, I like the self-esteem building stuff he's doing. There are some hidden strings attached going on here. So what he just did, especially at the end of that segment, was elitism, basically. Now, he's not saying, so he's not saying you have to be Mormon to be this special spirit, because obviously the doctrine is that everyone's a special spirit. But in the context, there is this sort of sense that if you're the greater context of the church itself, there's this sense that you're sitting in a church pew and someone's telling you that you're a divine spark, that God, you're a child of God, basically. There's this sense that if you leave the church, that somehow you're not, even though technically the doctrine is that everyone's a child of God. There's a sense that Mormons are more special childs of God than people outside the church. So in order to access these concepts that he's talking about, these sort of celestial concepts, you kind of have to believe all of it. Otherwise, you're not, and therefore you have to be in the church to have access.
Well, and we know that in the church, it's not just belief. You have to believe in it.
Do all
have
stuff.
to endure to the end. You have to pay tithing. You have to go through all the ordinances, and you have to, if you mess up, like if you leave the church, if you have doubt, then all of those things are stripped away from you.
Right. So there are some implied hidden strings attached, basically, to this feeling of elitism, this feeling of I am a special snowflake, but there's those hidden strings.
Yeah. Well, and anytime you hear anything that's good or special or elevated, that they're trying to say this is what the church provides you, the flip side of that coin is if you leave us, you're not going to get this.
Yep.
And so that's why, in groups that are really, really damaging to the psyche of their members, like the Moonies or the Jehovah's Witnesses, where you see a little bit more of that type of damage. If members leave because they don't meet the standards or whatever, but then they don't understand the history that actually, impeaches their claim to any divine authority, then they spend their life in exile feeling like they're just not good enough to be among those elect people.
Right.
That's why I feel it's important for people to be familiar with church history, is because if you don't understand how their claims to this special authority are really without any legitimate foundation, then you're going to feel like you're not among the special, and you're going to deprive yourself of personal and individual self-worth, which you would have claim to otherwise.
Which is interesting. It's a metaphorical outer darkness.
Yeah, that you impose upon yourself through ignorance, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go.
The Savior's sacrifice opened the door of salvation for all to return to God. His grace is sufficient for all who humble themselves before God. His grace is the enabling power that allows access into God's kingdoms of salvation. Because of his grace, we will all be resurrected and saved in a kingdom of glory. Even the lowest kingdom of glory, the celestial kingdom, surpasses all understanding, and numberless people will inherit this salvation.
There was an if statement at the beginning of that little paragraph, which was if they humble themselves before Jesus. So, which
not only that, but he's quoting a part of the Book of Mormon that's basically, if you deny yourself all ungodliness, then his grace is sufficient for you. And if you look at that language and you say, well, wait a second, what does it mean to deny yourself all ungodliness? Well, it basically means that you have freed yourself of sin. You've repented of everything, and you do not, because you're enduring to the end, you never ever repeat any of those sins ever again. And it's something that people have labeled the impossible gospel of Mormonism. It's just basically this chain of doctrines which are unachievable and keep people in a state of perpetual inadequacy.
Yep, the demand for purity again.
Yeah.
But the Savior's grace can do much more for us. As members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we aspire to something unimaginable greater. It is exaltation in the celestial kingdom.
Okay, he's making a distinction here, which I think is important. He just basically said that God's grace is good enough for everyone. That will get you in the lowest kingdom, and we know the lowest kingdom is just like, bam, it's awesome. from compared to life here on earth. And now he's talking about exaltation. And this is a nuance which was missing from his talk in the last conference, where everyone thought that when he was talking about grace, they were talking about getting everything that God has.
Right.
And now it's good. He's going to address that, because remember, he's saying in the Mormon church, we have exaltation. So now we're getting to the meat that you actually need to have. And this is unfortunately where all of the simple gospel that he was talking about before falls away, because now you get into the requirements for the temple, the temple ceremony, all of those ordinances that are part of it, celestial marriage. And, if you want to know what celestial marriage is, and you go back and you say, well, how did this start? How did this ordinance come to the earth? And you have to know about polygamy, and you have to know, when Joseph did that, he also did polyandry. He married other men's wives. And that's where you can say you want it simple, and you can say that it's simple, but the fact of the matter is it's not as simple as they want it to be.
Yeah, and that's the milk before meat stuff, and it's deceptive. I mean, it's sadly deceptive, and there is an issue with salvation and exaltation. Both of those concepts in the church are interchangeably conflated or separate depending on how convenient it is for the topic at hand. So if it's a Sunday school lesson, then yeah, exaltation and salvation are completely interchangeable, and all the things we know about one apply to the other. But when you're talking about this talk on grace, well, yeah, then we have salvation is for everyone, but that's not really it. That's not really what you want. What you want is exaltation. And so here's a new hoop that you have to jump through. So it's deceptive, and they get the best of all worlds when they do that, because they can make whatever claims about those doctrines are the most convenient at the time.
Yeah,
so.
And it's part of the loaded language where they have special definitions that they can use, which mean one thing to people outside and something different to people who are in the know. So when evangelical Christians hear him talk about, oh, that's a great talk on grace, they don't understand that the salvation that they're talking about in Mormons is not what Christians think salvation is. So let's see where he goes from this.
It is life eternal in the presence of our Father in heaven. It is the greatest gift of God. In the celestial kingdom we receive of his fullness and of his glory. Indeed, all that the Father hath shall be given unto us. Exaltation is our goal. Discipleship is our journey.
Okay,
Yeah,
I can just see the memes. I can see the memes coming out. Exaltation is our goal. Discipleship is our journey. And remember, discipleship means obeying the church authorities.
He just undid everything he did previously in the talk. So I'm really, really disappointed. If their goal was to help reduce the church-wide issue of depression by having people lay off the toxic perfectionism, he just took everyone who started the talk going, yeah, okay, maybe I could cut a few corners and kind of chill out and relax. Now he's just
you can chill out if all you want is that lower kingdom. Remember, and that's still grace gives you that, so you can chill.
So you're
but
good.
If you want to be super VIP heaven,
Yep, you better get your butt in gear pretty quickly. Otherwise, God doesn't want to talk to you forever. And that's shunning, by the way. That's shunning and ostracism. If God's like, yeah, sorry, you weren't quite good enough, I'm not going to talk to you. Yeah, they're putting...
Okay, now you're accusing God of shunning and ostracism.
Not God. The leaders of the church. The leaders of the church are using God as a pawn to say that God will shun you if you don't measure up. And that's... If I were God, I would be really upset about that. But I'm not God, so I should be humble. And...
Okay, let's see where he goes.
All right.
As you exercise a little faith and begin your walk as a peaceable follower of our Lord Jesus Christ, your heart will change. Your whole being will be filled with light. God will help you become something greater than you ever thought possible.
A little bit of euphoria induction there, by the way. So, even I feel a little bit, I don't even believe it. And I feel a little like, wow, yeah, like that's awesome. So just pointing that out.
Well, again, anytime they say good things that you can get, you have to remember that what they're doing is they're putting the carrot out there, and you have to remember that you have to conform, you have to obey in order to get that carrot. Yep. And the grace that is afforded to everyone is kind of like the free carrot, but that only gets you to the lower heaven. So, you're going to, it's good that he says that you're going to feel all of these things as you walk on your path to discipleship. But what he's saying is, as long as you keep obeying us, don't question, don't doubt, then you're going to have these great feelings. And if you start to doubt, if you start to fall away, those feelings are going to go away. And, that's true to some extent, because when people learn that Joseph's claim to legitimate authority are wrong, they do go through an existential crisis, and it feels like crap.
It does.
But that's also what the Jehovah's Witnesses go through when they learn that Charles Taze Russell was full of crap. They feel an existential crisis. Their life falls apart. They feel just broken and destroyed. And it's when they start to piece their life back together, they start to claim things that are authentically and legitimately themselves, then they start to find a happiness that is derived from within, that sustains them, rather than something that they have to keep in supplication to an organization for. And so happiness comes gradually over time, but it's not until after a great period of difficulty. All right.
And you will discover that the gospel of Jesus Christ is indeed working in your life. It works. Brothers and sisters, dear friends, I pray that we will focus on the simplicity that is in Christ and allow his grace to lift and carry us during our journey from here, from where we are right now, to our glorious destiny in our Father's presence. As we do so, and someone will ask us, how is being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints working for you? We will be able to say with pride and in all humility and with great joy, it works. It works wonderfully. Thank you for asking. Would you like to know more? This is my hope, my prayer, my testimony, and my blessing in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
So it's funny, at the end, he tied it all into missionary work. Make sure that we can increase our numbers. One thing that occurs to me about his talk is that people who follow Denver Snuffer would look at this talk and they'd say, well, wait a second. As I understand the gospel, based on what Denver Snuffer is saying, I just have to have a relationship with Christ. I don't have to worry about all these meetings and all of this other crap that you're trying to say we need to lay off of. He's basically telling the church they need to get more and more like the message that Denver Snuffer has. And he's telling people stay in the church when the Snufferite movement that's and I know they hate that term, but that's gaining more traction in the Mormon corridor. They're saying, why do I have to be a part of this organization? There's God and there's me. Why is this third party involved in it? And they're finding a religion that they're able to shape around their lives in a very personal way that the church itself is not able to do. And as that community grows more, people will find some of the social aspects and benefits that the church used to have somewhat of a monopoly on. And they'll find fulfillment in it.
Same with the Sunstone movement, right? Which the Snufferites are kind of a part of. There's some Venn diagrams going on here. But there are so many other Mormon communities that fall in the Mormon spectrum somewhere that are offering alternatives to this church. So, I do not envy the modern church leaders at all. I mean, I envy all of their rich trappings and stuff, but I don't envy the problems that they're facing. They're facing some really severe. They are currently facing their own double bind. They are going to be damned if they do and damned if they don't. They can't ignore all these problems anymore. The old mind control techniques aren't working anymore. Like Milieu control is a big one. The internet is now preventing Milieu control from working. And if they come out and are honest about a lot of these things or start lightening up on some of the harsher doctrines, then they're going to lose the more hardcore members. So, and then you've got the Snufferites on one end and the Alan Rockman guys on the other, and you've got the progressives over here, and it's just, by the way, all of us kind of seem to get along with each other really well for some reason.
Well, they're
the
unified by a
ex-Mormons.
common enemy.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the church is in a real bind, and it's interesting watching these conferences the last couple of years. They tend to be really reactive, and this is yet another reactionary talk. It's Uchtdorf very directly addressing issues of doubt, addressing issues of the gospel not working for people. They're just reacting all over the place.
All right, so our major themes on this talk then, I would say first, he starts out with milieu control. Specifically, don't look for truth on the internet. You know, you already have a physician, i.e. general authorities. We just called them 3 new apostles. So look for what we have. Don't look on the internet because, you know, we already have given you your diagnosis and your prescription. And so you should be happy with that. So that's kind of, he started with that.
Yep.
What's the next major theme?
Well, he's like, the diagnosis is, yeah, maybe we were telling you in the past to complicate. He didn't admit that, but anyway, he's like, now you got to simplify. You got to simplify your life. You got to cut down your diet a little bit and maybe exercise a little bit, and you'll be healthy. So, yeah.
So maybe there's a healthy message there in terms of simplifying the excessive demands, which are, you know, usually a part of this, but it's tied to this idea that there is a positive effect. There is a healing. There's, you know, this change of heart that's going to happen, but only if you do those simple things.
Yep.
And so if those, even though we've simplified it, if those simple things aren't working for you, you need to do more of it.
Right. He didn't say, you know, if you want to take a 6-month break from the gospel, if you want to just spend your Sundays with your family, go out and give that a shot. He didn't say that.
Which, by the way, I want to encourage anyone that is feeling difficulty in church, take a sabbatical from church. You know, when we first started to distance ourselves, Sundays was museum days, and we just went to museums, we went to state parks, and it was just such a beautiful thing to commune with nature, to commune with science, to do, you know, just kind of have that time where you didn't have the stress of having to dress up and having to do all those things. And it was like a revelation to us. It was such a beautiful thing. And now we have what we call Second Saturday. And it's one of the, you know, Sunday really is a day of rest. It really is a day of rejuvenation when you are able to do it free of all of these.
And I just met a gal yesterday who still has a testimony, and she's taking a break from church because of the trauma and stress that she feels there. And so even if you still have a testimony, it can be really healthy if you're really stressed out at church to just take a step back, not to a higher plane, as Uchtdorf said, but just take a step back and take a breath, because you know what? A loving, benevolent God is going to understand. He's going to understand whatever it is you're going through. You gotta take a breather and give yourself a break, you know?
How frequently have you heard the story of the woman who's now, you know, distanced herself from the church, but can tell you that, you know, she spent years where she would come home from church and she would just cry and sob, you know, in her closet, because she just didn't understand why she wasn't finding the fulfillment that she was having. I've seen people in my own life that have gone through that transition for it.
Yeah, I don't think a loving God would want us to do that to ourselves. If it's not working for you, then there's another spiritual path out there for you, and that's what God wants you to see. I mean, that's what the Spirit is, right? We're supposed to feel good about it. We're supposed to feel fulfilled. And I'm going to say, if you're not feeling good about it and you're not feeling fulfilled, then maybe that's not what God wants you to hear. Maybe going to church for 3 hours on Sunday isn't where God wants you to be, you know?
All right. Any other major themes that he touched on in this? There was the simplify message, and then there was the be where you are, which, you know, as we said, is a good message. Just be who you are, start from where you are. But then he tied it into different levels of heaven, and the fact that you have to fulfill the requirements of Mormon existence in order to get everything that God has.
Yeah, and that was disappointing. That was disappointing. Kind of canceled. I feel like he canceled out the good things that he did in the previous part of the talk. So.
All right. Well, thanks for being a part of this first talk discussion. And if things work out well, we'll continue to take a look at the rest of the talks from General Conference.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right. Take care.